Mogilny to Fedorov. Fedorov back to Mogilny. Scores!
What if I told you that one of the NHL's greatest scorers didn't just sign with a team? He risked his life escaping from the Soviet Union to play hockey. From his stunning 76-goal season to becoming one of the first Russian players to score over 1,000 points in the NHL, Alexander Mogilny was truly one of the most explosive skaters in hockey history. And his highlights are honestly some of the best you'll find anywhere. But how did this Soviet deserter make it to North America with KGB agents looking for him? And why would he risk everything, his family, his safety, and his reputation, just to play in the NHL? Well, to find out, we have to go back to 1989. The Soviet national team, featuring star right-winger Alexander Mogilny and line mate Sergei Fedorov, had just won the World Championship gold medal in Stockholm, Sweden. But how is it that a player from this powerhouse Soviet program, at the peak of his career and with the honor of representing his country, would suddenly decide to throw away everything and flee to America? You see, Mogilny wasn't just any player. He was the first Soviet NHL draftee to defect during the Cold War, at a time when leaving the USSR was seen as treason. What made this 20-year-old risk it all? And how did he become one of the most dangerous goal scorers the NHL has ever seen? Alexander's hockey journey began in the small town of Khabarovsk near the Chinese border, about as far from Moscow as you could get in the Soviet Union. At just 6 years old, little Alex was already spending hours on frozen ponds, often in temperatures that dropped to minus 30 degrees. The cold was normal for us, Mogilny once recalled. We didn't know any different. Sometimes my toes would freeze so bad I couldn't feel them, but I kept skating anyway. The Soviet hockey system spotted his talent early. By age 13, Mogilny was sent to a special sports boarding school where hockey wasn't just a game. It was basically a full-time job. We trained 3 times a day, every day, he said in a rare interview. Morning was skating drills, afternoon was strength work, evening was game tactics. No days off, no summer breaks, just hockey, hockey, hockey. This brutal schedule created players with incredible stamina and technical skills, but it came at a price: their childhood. When Mogilny joined CSKA Moscow, the famous Red Army team, at just 17, he quickly realized that his relationship with his coaches was nothing like the ones in North America. Under the legendary Viktor Tikhonov, players were treated like military units, not athletes. Tikhonov never spoke to us as people, Mogilny later admitted. We were just chess pieces to him. If you made a mistake in practice, you might not see your family for weeks because you'd be locked in barracks. Despite the harsh treatment, Alexander's talent was undeniable. His incredible speed and wicked shot made him stand out even among the elite Soviet players. His teammate Igor Larionov saw something special in the young winger. Alex wasn't like the rest of us. When we were told to do something, we did it without question. But Alex would ask why, and that was dangerous in our system. This independent thinking made Mogilny a target. While most Soviet players shared cramped apartments, traveled together, and lived under constant team supervision, Mogilny craved freedom. The first cracks appeared when Mogilny was denied permission to attend his father's funeral in 1988. That was when I knew this system didn't care about us as humans, he later said. How could they not let a son say goodbye to his father? The seed of escape had been planted in Alexander's mind, and soon he would take the biggest risk of his life. May 1989. The Berlin Wall was still standing, and the Cold War was very much alive, but things were starting to change. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev had introduced policies called glasnost and perestroika, which loosened the government's grip slightly. For the first time, some Soviet citizens could travel abroad for competitions, though always under strict supervision. The Soviet hockey team arrived in Stockholm for the 1989 World Championships as heavy favorites, with KGB agents watching their every move. Don Meehan, an NHL agent who represented players like Pat LaFontaine, had been quietly laying groundwork to bring Mogilny to North America. "I'd been talking with the Buffalo Sabres for months," Meehan later revealed. They drafted Alex in 1988, even though nobody thought he'd ever be allowed to leave the USSR. The Sabres general manager Jerry Meehan, no relation to Don, had taken a huge gamble with the 89th pick, hoping that someday, maybe years later, they might get their hands on this Russian talent. What Alexander was planning wasn't just against the rules, it was considered treason in the Soviet Union. The punishment for desertion was prison, hard labor, or worse, explained former Soviet player Slava Fedosov. And not just for you, your family would suffer too. Mogilny knew that if he left, he might never see his mother or brother again. His escape would anger powerful people in Moscow and could end with KGB agents hunting him down. Every night, I couldn't sleep thinking about what could happen, Mogilny admitted years later. But staying meant giving up my dreams and living in a system I couldn't accept anymore. The plan went into action on May 2nd, 1989. The Soviets had just won the gold medal, beating Canada in the final game. While his teammates celebrated at a team dinner, Mogilny pretended to be sick and stayed behind. In reality, he slipped out of the hotel through a back entrance where Don Meehan was waiting in a car with the engine running. My heart was beating so fast I thought it would explode, Mogilny later said. I had nothing with me. No bags, just the clothes I was wearing and my gold medal in my pocket. They drove straight to the American embassy in Stockholm, where officials were expecting them. Within hours, Alexander was on a private plane to New York and then to Buffalo. The 20-year-old, who barely spoke a word of English, had arrived in America with no money, no belongings, and no idea what would happen next. But for the first time in his life, he was free. October 5th, 1989, just 5 months after his dramatic escape, Alexander Mogilny stepped onto the ice at Memorial Auditorium for his first NHL game with the Buffalo Sabres against the Quebec Nordiques. The young Russian's hands were shaking as he took his first shift. I was terrified, he later admitted. In Soviet Union, we had 3,000 people at games. Now there were 16,000 screaming fans, and they all wanted to see what this defector could do. They wouldn't have to wait long. Just 20 seconds into his first NHL shift, Mogilny took a pass from Christian Ruutu and fired a wrist shot past goaltender Ron Tugnut. The arena erupted. Alexander had become the first Soviet player to score in his NHL debut. His teammates were stunned by his raw talent but struggled to communicate with him. He didn't speak English at all at first, remembered Sabres captain Mike Foligno. We had to use hand signals to show him drills and practice. Dale Hawerchuk, the team's star center, recalled, Alex would just stare at me with these big eyes when I tried to explain plays. Then he'd go out and do things none of us could even attempt. Off the ice, things were even harder. Mogilny lived alone in a small apartment, eating mostly at McDonald's because he could just point at pictures on the menu. He kept his blinds closed, genuinely afraid that Soviet agents might be watching. I missed my family, he said years later. I was alone in a strange country where I couldn't even ask for directions. Despite these challenges, Mogilny managed 15 goals and 43 points in 65 games during his rookie season. But the playoffs brought a bitter disappointment. In the first round against the Montreal Canadiens, the Sabres lost the series, with Mogilny still adjusting to the pace and physicality of the NHL. Alexander sat silent in the locker room afterward, not fully understanding what his teammates were saying, but feeling the same pain of elimination. As his second season began, Mogilny's biggest hurdle wasn't his opponents. It was the smaller North American rinks. In Russia, we had big ice, lots of space, he explained. Here, everything happens faster, more hitting, less time to think. His Soviet training emphasized possession and passing, but the NHL game rewarded quick shots and physical play. Sabres coach Rick Dudley saw Mogilny struggling with the adjustment. He'd make 3 beautiful moves to get open, then look for a perfect pass instead of shooting, Dudley said. We had to convince him that sometimes being selfish was good for the team. The breakthrough came on March 10th, 1992, against the Hartford Whalers. Mogilny scored 4 goals in a single game, showcasing the shooting ability that would soon make him one of the NHL's most feared snipers. Something clicked that night, Alexander recalled. I stopped overthinking and just played. His English was improving too, allowing him to build chemistry with his line-mates. When the Sabres acquired Pat LaFontaine in a blockbuster trade during the 1991-92 season, they found Mogilny the perfect center. LaFontaine's playmaking and Mogilny's finishing ability created one of the most dangerous duos in hockey. As Mogilny grew more comfortable in North America, his philosophy about hockey evolved. In Soviet system, coach tells you exactly where to be, when to shoot, he explained. In NHL, I learned to trust my instincts. When asked about his approach to scoring goals, Alexander simply said, I don't think about scoring. The second you think about it, you miss. I just see the open space and the puck finds it. This mindset would lead to one of the greatest individual seasons in NHL history. Alexander Mogilny had an extraordinary 1992-93 season, scoring 76 goals and 127 points, tying for the NHL lead in goals and setting franchise records for the Buffalo Sabres. The chemistry between Mogilny and LaFontaine was magical. Pat could put the puck on my stick through defenders that nobody could see, Alexander explained. I didn't even need to call for it. The puck just appeared. LaFontaine, who recorded 95 assists that season, put it simply, Alex was the easiest player I ever had to find. Just throw the puck to a spot and he'd be there even if he wasn't there when you started the pass. Together, they produced a staggering 236 points in a single season. Despite their regular season dominance, playoff success eluded the Sabres. In the 1993 playoffs against the Montreal Canadiens, Mogilny was having his best postseason performance when disaster struck. During Game 3, he crashed awkwardly into the boards and broke his leg. From his hospital bed, he watched helplessly as the Canadiens eliminated Buffalo and went on to win the Stanley Cup. That was the hardest moment, he later said. I felt like I let everyone down. As injuries began to mount for both Mogilny and LaFontaine, the Sabres' championship window started to close. After a contract dispute following the 1994-95 lockout, Buffalo shocked the hockey world by trading their Russian star to the Vancouver Canucks for forwards Mike Peca and Michael Wilson. Sabres coach John Muckler, who had helped develop Mogilny's defensive game, admitted, trading Alex was the hardest decision we ever made, but his heart wasn't in Buffalo anymore. In Vancouver, Mogilny found new life playing alongside fellow Russian Pavel Bure, known as the Russian Rocket. Alexander scored 55 goals in his first season with the Canucks, but once again, playoff success remained elusive. The partnership with Bure never reached its full potential due to injuries, and by 1999, Mogilny was on the move again, this time to the New Jersey Devils. It was in New Jersey, under the strict system of coach Larry Robinson, that Alexander would finally achieve his dream. On June 10, 2000, Mogilny, now playing a more defensive role on a checking line, helped the Devils defeat the Dallas Stars to win the Stanley Cup. As he lifted hockey's greatest prize, the cameras caught tears in his eyes. 11 years after I left everything behind, he said, I finally held the cup. This made all the sacrifice worth it. But Alexander's championship glory was short-lived. Following another lockout, the Devils, facing salary cap issues, let him sign with the Toronto Maple Leafs in 2001. Toronto marked the beginning of Mogilny's decline. At 32, years of high-speed hockey had taken a toll on his body. Back problems limited his explosiveness, and a mysterious hip condition required several surgeries. My mind still knew what to do, he explained, but my body couldn't keep up anymore. Despite these limitations, Alexander showed flashes of his old brilliance, including a 79-point season with the Maple Leafs in 2002-03. After a brief return to New Jersey, Mogilny played his final NHL game on December 31, 2005. The chronic hip condition had become too painful to continue. At age 36, with 473 goals and 1,032 points in 990 games, he quietly retired. Alexander became just the second Russian player to score 1,000 points in the NHL. But unlike many stars, there was no farewell tour or emotional send-off. I was never about the attention, he said years later. I just wanted to play the game I loved. The recognition Alexander deserved would come slowly. In 2018, he was inducted into the Buffalo Sabres Hall of Fame, where fans gave him a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. When asked what he missed most about hockey, Mogilny didn't mention the goals or even the Stanley Cup. I miss the locker room, he said. The jokes, the card games on the plane, the feeling of belonging somewhere for a man who risked everything to find freedom in a new country. Perhaps that sense of belonging was his greatest achievement of all. Alexander Mogilny's legacy goes far beyond his impressive stats. As the first Soviet player to defect during the Cold War, he cracked open a door that many others would eventually walk through. Before Mogilny, NHL teams were hesitant to draft Soviet players, believing they'd never be allowed to leave their country. After his escape, teams began taking chances on Russian talent, forever changing the landscape of the NHL. In many ways, the wave of Russian superstars we see today, from Ovechkin to Kucherov to Panarin, all owe a debt to Mogilny's courage in 1989. What made Alexander truly special was how he blended Soviet and North American styles into something entirely new. From the Soviet system, he brought extraordinary skating technique and puck handling skills refined through thousands of hours of drilling. From North America, he adopted a shooter's mentality and physical resilience. The result was a player who could score in ways nobody had seen before, beating goalies with quick-release wrist shots from impossible angles, or using deceptive speed to create breakaways out of nowhere. Despite all his achievements, the 76-goal season, Stanley Cup championship, and becoming one of only 32 players in the Triple Gold Club, winning Olympic gold, World Championship gold, and the Stanley Cup, Mogilny remains somewhat overlooked in hockey history. He played in smaller markets like Buffalo and Vancouver during an era dominated by Gretzky, Lemieux, and Waugh. His quiet personality and dislike of media attention meant he rarely made headlines off the ice. Perhaps most telling is his absence from the Hockey Hall of Fame, despite statistics that surpass many who have been inducted. Alexander never played for recognition. His former teammate Dominik Hasek once said, "He risked his life just for the chance to play the game freely, on his terms." That tells you everything about the man. In many ways, Mogilny's story isn't just about hockey. It's about the human desire for freedom, the courage to leave everything behind and finding success in a new world. From a small town in far eastern Russia to NHL stardom, his journey remains one of the most remarkable in sports history. So, let me know what you think below. Where does Alexander Mogilny rank among the greatest NHL players of all time? Is he a top 20 player whose Hall of Fame snub is a travesty? Or is he exactly where he belongs in hockey history, respected but not revered? Whether you think he's underrated or properly rated, please share your thoughts below. I would love to hear them. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of hockey's most fascinating careers, please hit that like button and subscribe to help us reach 10,000 subscribers. These videos take countless hours to research, write, and edit, and your support means everything to us. If we hit that 10K mark, I've got a special video planned on the most controversial trade in NHL history that changed the fate of two franchises forever. Click that subscribe button now so you don't miss it.